Hi, everyone. Welcome to those who are online and those who are in person. This session is the Power of Belonging, Strategies for Educators. I am Jessica Harris. I am from the Department of Health Promotion and Wellness, and also working with John, filling in for Maggie as kind of the interim assistant helper director over the spring semester. So I've been working a lot with different types of issues with sense of belonging and strategies, and kind of working towards my own professional development in this area. So I'm happy to kind of share what I've been working on with everyone. So I did put in the chat a Jamboard, and I do want to do a little bit of a reflection here. Hopefully this works as we click on it. John, if I click at the top, everyone should be able to see it when I go over.
Yeah.
All right, so I want everyone to kind of first reflect for a second on an academic moment that stands out to you where you felt like you belonged. Where you felt at home. So this is an academic moment for you where you felt like you actually had a sense of belonging in the classroom. So for those of you who may have used Jamboard before, what you can do is kind of use any of the Post-it notes to the side. And if we could do a little bit of a reflection here on what that moment is to you or was to you and what that felt like. Is everyone able to access it? When were you able to? Oh, you only? Okay, hold on. Should be.
Yeah, and make change to editor.
Oh. There we go. Should have access now. Thank you, Gwen. Yes, I want to get on it. Do I go on that Zoom link? Yes. It's in the well, it's in the chat, but you may. Yeah. If you want, you can also just pop it in the chat to what that moment looks like for you. Looks like we have some being able to openly share, having opportunities in academics, conferences, being able to share ideas for more work, developing expectations. For me personally, an academic moment that stood out for me was where I felt like I was able to participate, and I felt like I belonged enough to be able to raise my hand and actually participate in a classroom where I felt like my opinion was actually going to be valued by my peers and also my professor. Someone else had in there sharing presentations, research, feeling like they belong enough to be able to be valued and respected with their research. It's great. Collaborating on projects. Excellent. So then kind of thinking about that academic moment, what are one or two things about that environment that fostered your sense of belonging? When we think about those moments that we have as to why we felt like we belonged or we felt at home in that academic setting, why did we feel like that was? What was that instance? Like I said, for me, ultimately, that was really feeling like I belonged because of the way the faculty member had designed the classroom so that all students were able to participate and felt like they belonged, being able to have that type of dialogue. So for me, that was a way to really kind of open up. So this is a great way too, with your students, to kind of open up and kind of see what kind of academic experiences they've had prior, and what their sense of belonging may look like, as a way to kind of engage them in kind of an open dialogue as well. So I just wanted to kind of get to see what people's kind of sense of belonging has been, what they've had experiences with in academics. So a little bit of background. So belongingness is a basic human motivation. We all share a strong need to belong. We know this from basic Maslow's hierarchy of needs. When we think about our students as well on the college campus, when we think about belongingness, this is their belongingness, their feeling of wanting to be respected, valued, and be a part of our campus. And this is a need that everybody has. It's our basic kind of human right. It's our basic human need, our human motivation. And it is something that's very important and essential in all aspects of our lives. And we think about kind of our campus environment right now and thinking about retention and thinking about academic success. It's very important for us as educators to take this into account. So some objectives today for this session. So I'm going to talk a little bit about who's impacted, the importance of belonging in academic success, as well as the social emotional development, a little bit of some theoretical frameworks behind this. Then kind of our role as educators in the classroom and outside of the classroom in regards to sense of belongingness, and then some practical strategies and hopefully some resources and actionable steps and some tools that we can all use inside and outside of the classroom. Hopefully that you guys can all use in your future classes and moving forward, trying to kind of cultivate this sense of belonging. So two different kind of terms in a sense. When we think of the term sense of belonging in general, it just refers to this feeling of connectedness. And it's important for everyone to feel like they matter. And again, that they feel like they're valued. When we think of students in terms of college, it is this perceived social support on campus. That's a feeling of that they are connected to the experience on campus, that experience that they're cared about, that they matter, and that they're valued by important members of the campus community, which is us as faculty, which is the campus community as a whole, such as faculty, administration, staffs, and also their peers in the classroom, that they're known by their peers, that people know their names, and that they feel like they belong, essentially. So when we think about this sense of belonging, it's not only in the classroom, it's outside of the classroom, being able to have experiences with peers, experiences in clubs, organizations, and goes beyond that. So who is impacted? Everyone. When we think of our own feelings of belonging, we all want to belong. We all want to feel like we're respected and we're valued. But we do know that disproportionately minoritized students are actually ones that are negatively, more disproportionately impacted in regards to academic performance. So when we think about who is impacted in our classrooms, we want to think about making sure that we're being inclusive and we're reaching all of our students, and that we're creating and fostering environments that we have all of our students that we're reaching, and that we're creating environments that are welcoming. And I do have some strategies and tools, hopefully, that can help everyone kind of open up dialogue in the classroom and also create these welcoming and safe environments with different kind of tips and tricks. So some importance. So why is this important for us to know as educators? because it does foster motivation and engagement in the classroom. Also, this academic integration, we want to see students to have improved GPAs. We want our students to stay, we want them to graduate, we want to retain them. And we also want our students to have quality college experiences. We want them to belong, we want them to stay here. It also actually impacts their overall mental health and their social emotional health for long term, outside of their years here in college. Overall, we know that just belonging and feeling respected is an important part of our overall lives. So when we think about that social and emotional support, some of those key things, one of the biggest things is mental health and well-being. We know this is one of our big initiatives on campus. We know that we've talked about this for a long time. There's been a lot of initiatives and advisory boards built around mental health and well-being, not only for us as faculty, but also our students, right? So when we think about mental health, when students feel like they belong, they experience less social isolation, loneliness, less anxiety, and specifically supportive relationships can help with sense of belonging. And this impacts one's emotional state and overall their psychological well-being. So the more that we can provide these relationships, these supportive relationships, whether it's with us as faculty or peers or other campus community members, the more likely students are going to feel like they belong, that they're not isolated and have less anxiety. Stress reduction. Belongingness alleviates stress by providing a supportive network of peers, mentors, faculty who offer the emotional support, that understanding and encouragement for our students, and resilience in coping. So when students are like, they feel connected to a supportive community like our campus as Lakers, they're going to feel better equipped to handle any academic setbacks or life setbacks and any academic pressures that come along with their day-to-day or personal challenges. Also, identity development. Belongingness supports college students in their identity development process just by being a part, of a campus community where one feels accepted and valued. Students can explore and express their authentic selves, especially in the classroom. Giving them opportunities to do this is very important. And peer support and friendships. Those opportunities both in the classroom and outside of the classroom, giving students opportunities to feel like they belong and engage in social interactions can really help them develop meaningful connections and help them participate in more campus activities. And then overall academic performance. When students feel like they're supported and connected, they're more likely to stay motivated and engaged and focus on their studies. Overall, emotional well-being and a sense of belonging contributes to cognitive functioning, concentration, and the ability to manage those academic challenges. So when we think about the absence of belonging, what does this do to students? So students who don't feel like they belong, they rarely stay in college. So feeling disconnected is a critical factor in students' decision to withdraw from an institution. So that lack of sense of belonging can undermine academic performance and often their overall plans to stay in college at all. They're less likely to even transfer or go to different institutions. So this absence of feeling like they belong is a sense of alienation, rejection, social isolation, loneliness, marginality, which essentially is linked to long-term health issues, which can be substance abuse, depression, and suicide. So not only are we talking about graduation retention rates, we're talking about overall mental health and overall well-being of our students. So even after they leave us, the sense of not belonging is detrimental to our students' lives when we're thinking about suicide and depression and substance abuse. So looking at some of these theoretical frameworks, we've probably all kind of heard of Tinto's model and the sense of belonging, but it recognizes kind of 3 points and which influences a student's journey. We look at pre-college characteristics, college experiences, students out of class experiences, and students who engage in both formal and informal integration, which is considered academic and then social experiences. So there are academic experiences within the classroom, and then there's social experiences outside of the classroom. And if they are participating in both of these things, such as the social activities with their peers, their friends, and also the academic side, they are actually less likely to withdraw from college. So this sense of belonging can be established through physical environments such as, going to the cafe and, actually participating in out of class events, but also the emotional aspects and experiences of hanging out with friends and the social aspect, but also digitally. The social media aspect is something to think about. And reflecting on Tinto's model, the integration of all of these aspects should be made available for our students and established as a working partnership when we're thinking about a campus community. There's multiple kind of facets that are moving in this process of sense of belonging. And this is the process of inclusion. When we think about the educational aspect, dispositional, circumstantial, culture, and then when we think about Boyer's model of community, how are we making a purposeful, open, just, discipline caring, and celebratory environment for our students? These are all aspects, fostered within the classroom, but also in our campus community to help kind of infuse and foster this sense of belonging for our students. So what does this mean for us as educators? This means that our role is critical. As educators, encouraging these positive interactions, whether in our classroom or outside of our classroom, whether in our advising sessions, if we are mentoring in research, if we are a faculty mentor or sponsor for clubs or faculty advisor, these are conditions that really matter for our students. So ranging from those advising networks to the co-curricular involvement, our learning communities, these are where we should be fostering the sense of belonging, really building rapport with our students and having these conversations and seeing how they're doing, how are they adjusting, whether they're freshmen, transfers, or even if they're a senior, right? How are they doing in their sense of belonging? Because as we know, if there is that absence of belonging, even mental health wise, this could be an issue for our students. So let's take a look at some strategies for building relationships in the classroom. So what can we do as educators to kind of start this process? Now, there's a lot of different things we can do. Of course, anyone can kind of take small things that you would like to do and implement them. So there's a ton of different kind of tools. But when we think about creating a welcoming classroom atmosphere, so establishing classroom norms activities, using inclusive language and inclusive materials, personalized interactions, knowing our students' names, pronouns, getting students to know each other's names. I'm on the sense of belonging advisory board here on campus, and one of the things in the survey that we did on campus, our students had kind of lower stats when we were looking at, do students know each other in the classroom? Do they actually know each other's names? And a lot of our students said no, they don't actually leave the semester knowing each other. So it's important to kind of create that welcoming atmosphere. Yes, us as professors knowing our students' names, knowing their pronouns, pronouncing our students' names correctly, but also creating opportunities for our students to get to know each other in the classroom and create those friendships and building those relationships is important in creating a welcoming atmosphere. Establishing classroom norms, those activities of kind of setting what the guidelines are. What does it look like for productive dialogue in your classroom? I do on the first day, when we go over the syllabus, they create a syllabus for me as the instructor, right? It's appropriate for them to outline what they expect of me if I'm asking, what I expect of them. So those types of things can help give them ownership and create kind of an environment where they feel engaged and they feel like they belong. Incorporating collaborative activities. So not having just this passive classroom environment where you're teaching and talking to the students, designing those group projects, those discussions or in-class activities that require students to work together, problem solve, critical think, and really get to know each other, really interact and create and foster these experiences where they're creating relationships, learning what their strengths are, maybe what their growth areas are, and how to work together and lead and be team members essentially. One of the first things I do to kind of create the groups is a little bit of an icebreaker activity, but it's the marshmallow and spaghetti activity where they get their spaghetti and they get the marshmallows and they have 5 minutes to build the tallest structure. Well, you got thin spaghetti and you got marshmallows, and that's a hard task, but they really have a great time doing that. And I'll walk around and I'll notice who the key talkers are that are really leading the group, and I ask them, they can no longer speak, and then it gives the rest of the group members a chance to kind of start to facilitate the discussion, and you really get to see whose strengths come out and things like that. So it's a great way to give everybody in the group their point in time to discuss. But those are little things, just kind of get the group getting to know each other. Other little icebreaker activities, encouraging students to introduce themselves. I do an about me activity where they present about themselves, sharing their interests, engaging in those team building exercises, really to help break the ice, are really important for them to feel like they belong in the classroom and get to know each other. I think that's a very important step. Encouraging participation in active learning. So foster that participatory classroom environment where students are encouraged to contribute their thoughts, ask questions, engage in discussions, and not just the discussion where you call out a question and you're waiting for a student to raise their hand, because that doesn't reach everybody. Not every student wants to raise their hand. Discussions where maybe it's small group discussions where you're trying to reach every student. You're giving every student opportunity. Not every student wants to raise their hand, and not every student wants to kind of be in the group and actually facilitate a discussion, right? So what are other ways that you can reach students? So really leaving the classroom, this was something I took from our reading group this past spring, was leaving the classroom every class session saying, did I reach every student? Was I able to reach every student with every activity that I did today? And if I didn't, how am I going to refine that in my next session, right? So informal interactions, organizing what I call student hours, changing the frame of mind of office hours to student hours. Sometimes I've had students think office hours were office hours because it's my time and they're not allowed to come see me at that time. So student hours or coffee chats, coming here to the library with your students, to come into Starbucks. Having those informal interactions are where the students are like, oh, they're just like me. They have a life, they get to know you. And it helps normalize that imposter phenomenon, I've realized, where you share your experiences and they're like, oh, you went to grad school, you did this, I can do that. You start to kind of foster that growth mindset too. You get to know them, starts to relax that setting, and go outside of the office, meet them somewhere else, get on their playing fields and have those conversations. It's really important for the students to get to know us and feel like they belong here as a Laker and they belong here in our classroom and that they have a special relationship with us. Incorporating technology, something I've learned a lot from John about over the past couple of years, utilizing online platforms to facilitate virtual discussions. I've implemented a lot more polling into whether I do small chunking of my lectures as a way to have students poll in the classroom, or doing more virtual discussions. I learned from John metacognitive discussions in his asynchronous classes, ways for more online forums and group collaborations, really incorporating that technology so that students can really still have that online discussion, really get them collaborating still with each other, even if it's an asynchronous class, to make sure that you're still facilitating that engagement and sense of belongingness, even if it's not a face-to-face course. Something that I've done consistently with students, whether it's seniors, juniors, sophomores, or freshmen, I think it's really important to celebrate our students' achievements. Whether that is an athlete who won a game, from a student who has a job interview to a student that is doing a quest presentation, or a student that has a birthday to a student that is having a family event. Those types of things are really important. I've seen My students' faces just light up when they're mentioned at the beginning of the class, just for something small that they feel like they really appreciate, that you've remembered something that they've told you, that they're like, wow, she actually remembers who I am and what I told her last week, right? So celebrating those accomplishments, whether it's academic or even extracurricular, I think is really important to let them know that we care about them and we value what they tell us, right? And that we are listening to them, that we do value their voice. Sharing resources, we hear this a lot, connecting our students to relevant resources on campus, providing those professional networks on campus, having them come into our classes. Just from some of these sessions today, learned a lot more about C-STEP, adding that to resources. A lot of different things that we can provide for our students and creating different resource guides that are really important, whether it's even off campus, where to go off campus if there is medical resources that students need, suicide prevention information, all of that included, whether it's in your syllabus, whether it's a module within your bright space learning. All of those are important for our students to help create that sense of belonging as well. So looking at some ways to foster a sense of community. So cultivating, again, inclusive language practices. So ways to promote that inclusivity within our course materials are examples and discussions, really looking at how to incorporate diverse perspectives into our discussions, whether it's with cultural references, varied sources of knowledge, to kind of demonstrate inclusive and broad learning experiences. And this doesn't just have to be with looking at the types of individuals who write the textbook. It could be just varied sources of materials. Are you just using textbooks? Are you using textbooks and trying to incorporate podcasts and art? Is there other types of materials you're starting to kind of integrate into your materials? It's important to give a variety of materials, which John just talked about in universal learning and design. So addressing and preventing microaggressions, something I've started to do the past couple of years after going through AQ. Really starting to define what microaggressions are for my students and empowering students to take action if they hear microaggressions, and supporting students who have been victim of microaggressions, and really making sure that students understand what they are and what are the types of microaggressions, and educating them about them. Fostering open conversations about biases, stereotypes, and discrimination, but also examining my own and making sure that that is a process that is continuing all the time in my own professional development, seeking and reflecting, within myself as an educator, to make sure that, I'm constantly examining those and making sure that I'm mitigating the impact of those, even in grading practices, right? Anonymous grading practices, making sure that those are ways to go. Those are several different ways to kind of offer those strategies and fostering a sense of community. Incorporating student voice and choice. So allow our students, and these are great ways students love when you give them ownership of a course, because they're paying for the course, they want it to be theirs as well, as much as it's yours and your creation. So allowing them to be a part of creating the rubric, allowing them to be a part of creating an assignment, allowing them to be a part of the grading system. Those are ways to really give them ownership, and it will then motivate them. If they feel like they put a stake in something, they're then going to be more motivated to continue to be a part of that. If they helped create the assignment, they're going to be motivated to do the assignment, most likely on time and well, because they helped create it. So incorporating their voice and giving them choice. So if you have multiple types of variations of assignments, or ways that they can choose a type of assignment, if there's two different types, right? Giving them choice, again, also gives them ownership. Learning to use students' preferred names and pronouns. So another way that I like to do this is sometimes I'll have students do video recordings of them pronouncing their names. Sometimes I do that in my introduction portions of the course and icebreakers. This is a way to make sure that I learn students' names. Because again, consistently, saying our students' names wrong can also be viewed as microaggressions to our students, right? So making sure that we are trying to find ways to make sure that we know our students' names. So respecting chosen names, asking for preferred names, pronouns. I do that with little about me cards the first day. So providing those opportunities for students really then creates that welcoming environment, fostering that community for them as well. And acknowledging and validating student contributions. So if you are having activities where there's active participation, providing that positive feedback. So making sure that you're providing feedback for student on their work, sharing your thoughts when they're asking questions, and you're engaging in the contributions that are happening in the classroom. Students like to know what you think about their work. They like to know what you think about what they said in class. Those are, things they want to know. They want to know that they're being acknowledged. So promoting inclusivity in the classroom, some other little strategies. So when we look at this, when I think about the ways that I like to do this in the classroom, I think about how am I going to create a safe space next semester? And even when I was thinking about my summer classes in the online environment, what does creating a safe space look like asynchronously, right? I teach a sexual wellness course online. So creating a safe space in the online environment is really important with that type of content. So I do specific things in there about trigger warnings and things like that, and how to go about that in a discussion where students are actually creating their own guidelines in a discussion forum back and forth about what their community norms are in regards to creating the safe space. Incorporating diverse perspectives, how am I doing that within my online courses? And again, how am I getting to know my students in my course this semester? I've been thinking about in my online fostering dialogue, again, addressing bias and discrimination. How are you going to manage those hot moments when they happen in class? That's always been something that's been something that I worry about a lot when there are hot moments that arise. If you teach a course that has content, then maybe that happens a lot, or maybe it doesn't. If it does happen, how are you going to intervene? What is that conversation going to look like? If it's uncomfortable, what's the process you're going to take to address it? Because it needs to be addressed to create a safe space and environment for your students. Adapting your teaching strategies. So how are you going to adapt and refine based on your students' feedback? Are you asking for student feedback to make those refinements, to continuously use their voices in your class? And again, for me, the consistent professional development and self-education on these topics, because things are constantly evolving, in education. So it's important, for us as educators to consistently participate in CELT workshops, right? Because things are new and we're constantly learning new ways to make sure that we're engaging our students and creating a sense of belonging, so that they can get the best education and be academically successful, but also mentally and emotionally healthy as well. So again, positive and welcoming learning environment. So I wanted to share some of the tools that I've been using, and some have been adapted from different resources. So the Yale Purview Center for Teaching and Learning, this is like a little short belongingness survey. I have adapted some of these questions. There is ways to get feedback about what the sense of belonging in your classroom looks like. And these are great ways to just kind of do a little survey, whether it's face-to-face or online, that can be tailored to learn more about how you're interacting with both in and outside your classroom in regards to sense of belonging with your students. Asking questions like, I feel accepted in my interactions with the classroom, or the department, or the teacher or instructor. I feel comfortable talking about my background and culture in this department. I feel that people treat me based on assumptions of who I am. This is a great way to gauge, how our students are feeling about where they are in our department, in our class. And if you're really interested about seeing, what's going on with sense of belonging, this is a great way to kind of get that feedback and make refinements based on that. Some other types of activities, course trepidations activities. Sometimes I'll do this in my upper level classes, where students may may have anxiety about going into their higher level course because the content or subject matter is a lot more difficult. And I'll have students pair up when they're working in groups and share some of their questions or concerns that they may have about the upcoming course. This is a way to help them normalize imposter phenomenon and really help them provide a forum to discover that they're not alone in their worry or their anxiety about the course and kind of possibly what's to come, and really then kind of open up a dialogue about, we're all here, going into this content together, and we're going to work through it together. And even me as the instructor has been in the same boat before with biostatistics back in my master's program. So, thinking about my own courses where I felt like, whoa, sense of belonging, like I don't belong here. And when I share those experiences with students, it's like, oh, wow, Dr. Harris even felt like this before. Those experiences help them think, oh, okay, like this isn't just me, and helps kind of make them feel more comfortable. And again, like I said, the belonging survey is a great way to use empathy in our teaching and take a more empathetic approach, and really learn more about our students and kind of put ourselves in their shoes, really. So microaggressions discussion, and I'll share this whole PowerPoint in the chat before we go, but I don't know if anyone's seen the Look Different videos by MTV. If you don't feel as comfortable discussing microaggressions maybe yet in the classroom, if you haven't kind of went through, any professional development or, conversations surrounding them yet, using these videos are really great to open up dialogue because these are real life scenarios that, I've seen pretty much every one of these instances happen before. And it really explains what microaggressions are, their impact, and also shows your students, hey, we're going to talk about this today. And it kind of outlines your commitment to addressing them. And I think it's really important to let our students know that this is something that will be addressed in the classroom if it happens, and lets other students know, like, oh, maybe I have actually participated in microaggressions before and I didn't know it, right? So really educating students, and these are great kind of resources, the Look Different videos, really short, they're about 30 seconds, and it helps students kind of visualize and see, what microaggressions look like in actual examples. Creating resource banks. So again, going back to those examples of professional, academic, social support resources, giving documents organized by need is a great way. Sometimes I'll do resource banks in each module, depending on what health content we're doing too, because it kind of like is foster or kind of integrated into the course I'm teaching as well. So it's a great way to do it that way. Another thing I've done with my intro level students is student profile boards, which I'll do in the discussion. And it is something that I'll continue throughout the semester. And it's a discussion board where they're continuously sharing information about themselves, their names, their interests, their goals throughout the semester to keep, and it's outside of kind of the course content. It's just a way for them to continue to build friendships and kind of share their interests to still foster that sense of belongingness for the students, especially because we have an all online wellness management major. And one thing I used to always see in my course evals was the question about their engagement with peers, and it was always the lowest one I had. And I was like, well, I have discussions, why? I don't understand, but they weren't seeing the value in just responding to their peer. So it needed to be more, actual interaction where they felt like they were getting to know people. And I actually recently what was the event that we had where they all were there? It was the honors, the other one. It's the Adult Learner Honor Society.
It was an online Adult Learner Honor Society.
And we had several of our students there, and some of them came together, and they're from different places in New York City because they got to know each other in our classes, specifically from our classes. So I felt like, well, geez, we did something right, that they were getting to know each other as online students. So that was great. So well-being and success of our students. So some other resources here. And again, like I said, I'll share this PowerPoint in the chat before we go. But wellness check-ins, and this is a direct link to one of my surveys that I do. And this is an upper division level class. How's it going? Check-in. This is for one of my online classes. I do them in my face-to-face. I ask kind of about any course content or the structure of the course, anything that could be adapted to help their learning, what would they like to see more of in the course. And this is not like a mid-semester course eval. This is just me wanting to know, how is it going? And what's the hardest part of the course? I want to know what's difficult. I want to know what's not working for them. And then I want to know how they're feeling. I wanted to know, is it overwhelmed? And I got probably, I think only 7 people took it. This is completely anonymous, but I got, I think, a total of 4 emails immediately after posting this of students saying, thank you for just doing that. I've never had a professor ask me these questions or, actually do this. And based on the information, I made refinements in the course. And I sent out an email about it. And it actually, many students were really appreciative of, the refinements and the adjustments and, having their voice heard. So just these little check-ins are really, important, and it helps kind of foster that. Another way to do that, and I've seen other instructors on our campus do that too, is visual mood meters. If you're getting into your lecture or your short chunking lectures or whatever, starting it out, visual mood meter, right? How you're doing, or if you're getting into your group discussions, having them discuss what their visual mood meter is for the day. What do they look like? And some people will do different farm animals or something funny like that. There's a great way to kind of just see how they're doing, right? That's a great way for overall well-being. I have had instances where things were not going great and I was able to refer. So this is another way to help in that situation. Value of staying connected to loved ones. So another thing I learned from being on the Sense of Belonging Advisory Board was a lot of our students didn't feel like they were still as connected to back home in a way, which I thought was interesting. And something that I'm going to try and incorporate moving forward is, how are we, because I actually don't do this, and I thought about that, was I'm not identifying ways for students to engage in their support networks, I guess, outside of our campus, right? Well, yeah, but thinking about back home, especially for our first year students, I'm thinking about, how do I get them engaged on campus and those types of things, and friendships and our support networks here. And often I'll talk about support networks back home, but having them continuously building that connection is still important, and making sure that they're still fostering that. So I did create a new kind of assignment, family friend connection, where they're looking at it. Overall, the objective is to encourage college students to actively kind of engage in that. Oops, and I have lots of spelling errors there that I'll fix. But what they're doing is they're setting reflective journals, encouraging students to reflect on the impact of their regular communication with, their family and friends, and they're reflecting on how that went, kind of challenging them to kind of actually continue in their connection with home and those things, and kind of fostering their support networks. Another thing with increasing out of classroom interactions. So getting out there, the friendship bucket list. UConn for first year courses has wonderful lesson plans. Taylor Hudzak, actually, I had asked, and they have them out there for everyone to use, but I did ask for them to share. This is a nice little lesson plan about considering students' kind of college experiences, journal entries. They do kind of like a speed dating in a way, but it's like a speed friendship for the classroom. But then they also talk about the literature behind the importance of high impact practices for college freshmen, involving a more holistic approach when it comes to academics, engagement, involvement, and life skills. And they do talk about bucket lists, having our students make bucket lists of fun activities they want to do. And they give tons of different examples about things that they want to kind of share, with the class. And these are great ways for first year students, anyone doing signature courses or, GST 104, that can really help get students kind kind of involved in that friendship and kind of relating in those ways. Modeling empathy. So thinking as instructors, also other ways that we need to really think about our own experiences, but also how we model empathy in the classroom. Explaining reasons for our course design is a way to do that. Decisions and showing, or like our decisions for assignments, explaining the reasoning behind our rationales, those types of things, and giving them reasoning for our perspectives. It's a great way to kind of open up discussion, but also, modeling empathy in those ways, setting policies to kind of explain that. Those are great ways to kind of help our students understand, why we're doing things. And sometimes they may not understand. So just respect and inclusion. I've developed kind of little things that I think about when I go through my practices and modeling empathetic behavior, active listening to my students. How am I going to promote that? What will I do to encourage my students to seek clarification? How am I going to foster collaborative learning? So these are all little techniques that I just kind of have been thinking about my classroom experiences and reflecting on after my classes that I've had about how to kind of model that in the classroom. So those are tools to think about that I'll share with everybody. And again, same thing here, thinking about how we build flexibility into the classroom. Little tools here. When we think about flexibility, about date windows, assignments, are we doing things? Some people like to drop the low scores, those types of things. How are we really designing policies that reflect an understanding of our students? I think that's really important because our student today is very different from 20, 30 years ago. Our students are maybe taking care of entire families, working full-time jobs. They are doing internships. They're doing multiple different things. So building in flexibility, I think, is important, but also still maintaining that rigor is important. So I have some ideas that I've thought about over the past about building flexibility in here too, about assignment date windows, extended deadlines, and those types of things. So some actionable steps. I know we're running out of time here, but some things, just simple message. If anything you take away, from the session is really simply telling your students, even in the classroom, you belong at SUNY Oswego, you bring important knowledge, and that will help you be successful here. While we must take care not to single out or tokenize any students, we just must communicate the message that they belong here, that we value them, that we respect them, and letting them know out loud and often that they have a place here. And just by doing that, it's very simple. It can be very transformative and powerful for our students. And just letting them know that can be just a simple message, but very actionable. And the last thing I have is something that I've been using, and it's the University of, or Iowa State, reflecting on your sense of belonging practices. Their CELT has a little checklist here about before and after. I use it with my class sessions. How often have I been doing these things to foster that sense of belonging in my classroom? Have I been looking at how did I build rapport in the class? Did I communicate my concerns? Did I encourage these things? And it's a simple check, X or a star, something I want to try. So this is a way to consistently reflect after your class sessions about things you want to refine, because something that I learned from the reading group that we just had this past spring was journaling and writing after each session the things that you want to do differently, because I used to write them down in all kinds of different notes and things, and I never found them at the end of the semester. So finding different ways to really hold on to things and kind of inform my inclusive classroom plans, sense of belonging plans, for the future. And I don't know if we have much time for questions, but we're right on time. So I will open it up for any questions. I will put the PowerPoint in the chat for everyone, so you can have that. The links are in there, so if anyone's interested in using any of those tools, you should be able to have access to all of those. So I'll put that in for everyone. And if you do have any questions moving forward about any of the tools or anything, please reach out. Like I said, it's something new that I've been working on and learning more about. So just kind of growth and my own kind of tools that I've been wanting to implement. So you can always reach out, and you'll notice at the end of the PowerPoint, of course, there's tons of research in different areas here for the tools and frameworks as well. Great.
This is a lot of good stuff, Jessica. Thanks very much.
Great, thank you, everyone. And then we'll stop
They
sharing.
stop the recording, yeah.
Yep.
See you at 1 o'clock, John.
Okay. I'll be there.
I think, unless I'm in the